Hey Outlaws! Now, I gotta admit that chapter 370 definitely got me a little bit choked up. And it's because I have always loved Guts as a character so much because of everything he's had to overcome in his life and how immensely he's evolved as a character throughout the course of the manga. This most recent arc's conclusion has brought our hero Guts to yet another incredibly low point. And him essentially breaking up with his sword is not only symbolic, but deeply representative of some of the core facets of Guts when we look at him through the lens of developmental psychology. In a way, we're really fortunate that we get to see Guts' entire life play out through Kentaro Miura's amazing writing. And I can't think of another fictional character who I feel like I know so intimately. And this lends us a really interesting perspective to why Guts feels like he can no longer trust in his sword and what he needs to reconcile within himself to be able to move forward. So when we look at developmental psychology, a lot of different psychologists have postulated various theories about the developmental stages and the identity crises that we have to overcome during those age ranges to become self-sufficient and a fully actualized human. So now everybody, of course, experiences traumas and hardships throughout their lives. But then the stage where these things occur, the environment that we're in, and how we respond shapes a lot of the instinctual responses that we develop going into the future. Some of the theories have slightly different age ranges, but they're pretty close, and we actually do get to see Guts experiencing these different periods of his life and what he's going through and how he's adapting. The main one that I'm going to look at is Erikson's theory of psychosocial development. And this was introduced by Erik Erikson in the 1950s. He actually originally built this off of some of Freud's work, but that focused more on the psychosexual aspects. This is more about how different social factors in our lives affect the decisions and the turning points in our development. So if a conflict arises during a specific developmental stage and is sufficiently overcome, it builds a more stable foundation when you go into the next stage and also becomes kind of a core facet of who you are as a human. So now we all know that Guts was presented with a really rough start to his life. His birth mother was killed, strung up in a tree, and in her death, he was birthed from her corpse and found in a puddle of mud down below. So this first stage of life is from birth through infancy, about the age 1. And this is when either trust or mistrust is developed. So now Guts was really super fortunate that Shisu happened along and adopted him, because although he could not be provided a secure environment by his birth mother, Shisu efficiently filled that maternal role for him, and she provided Guts with adequate food, water, shelter, and nurturing. So she filled this role in Guts' life until she passed away when he was about 3 years old. So this means that since she was present during this time, and actually also during the second developmental stage of his life, which is early childhood or toddlerhood, this occurs from ages 1 to 3. So the developmental stage which arises during the second stage is one of autonomy versus shame and self-doubt. So in this stage, if the caregiver is able to provide a secure enough environment, the toddler is able to learn how to become self-sufficient. And I think it's fair to say that Guts very successfully navigated this stage. And although being a toddler raised within the environment of a mercenary band was probably fairly chaotic, I feel that Shisu mostly shielded Guts from some of the brutality happening around him, while also giving him ample opportunities to run around. He was able to engage with a lot of different people, a lot of different places, but his basic biological needs and safety were also being met. The next 2 stages of Guts' development are where we start to see some of the stable foundation of his life begin to break down. So it seems like from the manga that Guts was about 3 years old when Shisu died of the plague. So not only is the loss of the maternal caregiver at such a young age going to be a huge trauma and leave a huge scar on the psyche, this actually has a lot to do with different types of attachment styles, but that's going to be a different video because we have a lot to cover in this video regarding Guts' life, because he's now in his 20s and we're only talking about when he's 3. So after Shisu passed away, Guts' main caregiver became Gambino. Now, Gambino, he was the leader of a mercenary band, which meant that he already had his attention and his concerns spread really thin. He had to worry about providing for his men. He had to worry about their battle plans. He had to worry about their safety, his own safety, maintaining his role as a leader. And now he's going to have to also worry about Guts. And to be honest, he never really held a lot of affection for Guts. He always saw him as kind of a burden, a drain on their resources, and he also very openly accused Guts of being the cause of Shisu's death. So stage 3 of development occurs between the ages of 3 and 6 years old. And in the manga, we see a lot happen to Guts during this time, which shaped him to his very core and caused him to have such a strong dependency on his sword. During this stage, stage 3, the child is faced with the internal conflict of initiative versus guilt. And this occurs if the caregiver encourages, supports, and guides the child's initiative and interests. Now, Gambino did not exactly fail at providing Guts the ability to develop his own initiative. In fact, I would say that he was rather successful at this, because Guts has definitely developed a very remarkable drive to keep pushing forward, not depend on anyone, as long as he has his sword. Since Guts no longer had Shisu to take care of him when the mercenary band was off fighting, this meant that Guts was being dragged along to these battles from a really young age. And we know that this became a source of annoyance for Gambino because he needed to not only worry about his own safety, the battle plans, his men, but now Guts' safety. And because of this, he put a sword into Guts' hands at a really young age, because this is the only way that Guts would be able to take care of himself. And Guts really saw in real time that being able to become proficient with the sword was the only way that he was going to be able to live to another day. The famous scene from the manga, which occurred when Guts was about 6 years old, where Gambino is teaching Guts how to fight, he eggs him on to attack harder, and then when Guts gets his hit in, Gambino strikes back and hits him back even harder. Now, I know everyone likes to think, oh my gosh, this is so mean of Gambino, but realistically, he was teaching him to be strong and not to let his guard down, even when he feels like he's succeeding in the fight. And then later on, we do see, after the fight, Gambino comes, he brings some ointment to Guts, and Guts puts this on his wounds. And this shows that Gambino does indeed care about him. And the particular scene in the manga where we see Guts reflecting on this, sitting next to the river with his sword by his side, we can see Guts' heart just bloom as he interprets this as praise for a job well done, reinforcing that as long as he's being proficient with the sword, he's going to receive that positive reinforcement. So Gambino raised Guts in what he thought was the best way. He taught him how to fight, be strong, and as a young child traveling with a mercenary band, had Guts not been given these skills, he wouldn't have even been able to live to have the story in Berserk that we're reading. So going back to stage 3, Gambino does encourage, support, and guide Guts to use the sword, to depend on the sword, and most likely the only form of positive affirmation that Guts received from Gambino was relating to him using the sword. So this leads us to the next stage of development in Guts' life, which is from 6 years old until adolescence, or school age. The developmental issue faced during this age is industry versus inferiority, which in Guts' case means that he took all of his ability to use the sword, all of the praise that he received from others regarding his usage of the sword, all of those good feelings of acceptance, self-sufficiency, and just plain being awesome for what he was doing. And he assimilated that into the core of who he is. Guts was able to make his life situation better through his ability to wield the sword. Gambino most likely only praised and appreciated him when he was being self-sufficient, contributing to the group's resources, and able to look out for his own safety. And during this stage of development, we also see that Guts' stable life gets shaken up again right around the end of the stage when he's about 11 years old. This is when Gambino, who honestly most likely was starting to become somewhat jealous of Guts, his ability with the sword, his potential, his youth, and started to see him as like a future rival, he sold Guts to one of the other mercenary members, probably to knock Guts' ego down a few pegs and to kind of put him back in his place because he was feeling intimidated by Guts. And this is obviously a huge source of trauma for Guts, and we see it definitely affect his ability to connect with others when he gets older. But that's not the topic of this video, because this video we're just focusing on the sword. And Guts, with his faith once again placed in the sword, is able to regain his sense of power, his sense of self-worth, by killing the monster who violated him. And then later on, by killing his father figure, who also betrayed his trust, by allowing him to be violated in that manner. This is a big turning point for Guts, because as we're about to go into stage 5 of his development, which is his teen years until about the age of 20, Guts strikes out on his own. And it's during this stage of Guts' life where we see the events of the Golden Age arc and the Eclipse. And the developmental issue faced during this stage revolves around developing a sense of identity. Now, I don't need to get too much into how Guts identifies himself during these arcs, because he makes it abundantly clear over and over and over that as long as he has his sword by his side, he will feel calm. As long as he can swing his sword, he knows that he will survive. He knows his place in the world. And the only time he feels truly at peace is when he's swinging his sword. Not to mention all of the praise and admiration he receives by being the raider leader in the Band of the Hawk, what an asset he is to Griffith, how he goes and he wins these impossible battles. Guts definitely builds his core identity around his ability to wield his sword, to slay 100 men, to be able to do these impossible feats with his sword. And as long as he has his sword, that is the thing in his life that is dependable and brings him positive affirmations from those people around him. So at our current point in the manga, chapter 370, Guts is now in young adulthood. He's in stage 6, which is from the ages of about 20 until early 40s. And during this stage, the issues that he needs to come to terms with involve intimacy versus isolation. And we've already seen Guts make some huge headway on this front by allowing more people than we ever thought was possible to not only accompany him on his journey, but also to help him. Guts has been through a lot at this point. Physically, mentally, emotionally, and his body is just not really recovering well without the use of the Berserker armor anymore. We saw when he was trying to train on Elf Island, his aim is off, he can't grip his sword as well, and he just doesn't feel as strong as he used to. And when Griffith was right in front of him, he couldn't hit him with his sword. And not only could he not hit Griffith, but he also had to see Griffith take Casca, the prize that he had been fighting so hard to find, to obtain, to keep, to heal. He had to see Griffith be able to take her from him because he couldn't win that battle with his sword. And Guts, he can't any longer rely on just simply his sword and able to survive. Not if he's serious about being able to one day stand on equal ground with Griffith. And this is basically where I'm going to leave off, and where Guts is going to need to grow. Keeping with the theme of the psychosocial conflict that Guts needs to overcome right now at his stage in development, he can either stay locked in this room on the ship feeling sorry for himself and that his sword let him down, or he can stand up, be strong, and realize that he has a whole group of loyal companions who have a vast array of skills, who are ready to stand by his side and fight with him. And honestly, I believe that it's going to be the latter, and that Guts is going to come out of this even more badass and more refined. But let me know what you think in the comments section down below. If you want me to make more videos like this one, make sure you give it a thumbs up so that I know that you like it. And as always, subscribe to follow our journey. Love you, Outlaws. Mwah. Bye.